And I told her, I said, you're Catholic, right? She goes, yeah. I said, do you have a rosary? She goes, yeah. I said, why don't you pull it out and calm your mind and just pray on it? And then you don't have to be anxious about anything because you're covered. And she looked at me and she goes, honestly, it took a Jewish girl to tell me to pray the rosary.
This is Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God. I am your host, Trapper Jack. Ted Bundy, the serial killer, he was on death row and he was talking to a priest, a Monsignor. And he was recounting something that happened at a Florida sorority house where he was on a killing spree, going room to room. But he got to one room, opened up the door, young woman lying in bed, and he wanted to kill her. And he said, I couldn't kill her. He was trying to explain this force he felt, this mysterious force. And he said, I dropped my weapon and I ran. What was that? What was that about? That young woman told the same priest earlier about her side of it, how she was laying there holding a rosary. It was the rosary she prayed on every night because she promised her mom before going off to college that every night before she went to bed, she would pray a rosary for protection. Really? Does the rosary have that kind of power? Those beads, those Our Fathers, Glory Bees, and Hail Marys, do they have that kind of power? That kind of protection over evil? Just pure evil. Absolutely pure evil. Hiroshima, August 1945, that atomic blast, it just decimated everything. Everything was on fire, contaminated, obliterated, vaporized for a couple of miles. And certainly in that first mile, there was nothing. There was nothing left. But there was 8 blocks away, eight Jesuit priests were in their home, got knocked around a little bit, but they were fine. They lived out their lives, long lives. No contamination, no ill effects at all from that atomic blast. And doctors and scientists came in and examined them throughout their lives. Nothing. There was no effect on these 8 Jesuit priests or on the building that they were in. And it just boggled the minds of the doctors and the scientists. And they asked the Jesuit priests, what do you think? What do you think protected you? And they all said the same thing. It was Mary and praying the rosary every day, as she told us we were supposed to. And we believe Mary protected us through that rosary. Interesting, the scientists also said for that building to remain standing, it would take an equal or greater force pushing against that atomic blast to keep it standing. So what was that? What created that? And would you like to have that force in your life? I am to talk to you about the rosary this week, without question. I say that because, well, first, in the last couple of days, somebody sent me a video about the rosary. I woke up in the middle of the night with a song playing in my head, an instrumental tune playing in my head, and it was a tune that plays behind a group praying the rosary that I hear on the radio. I flipped on EWTN, Eternal Word Television, to hear the homily that day, and the priest happened to be a visiting priest who happened to be with a traveling rosary group. And he talked about being at Fatima last October 13th on the 100th anniversary of Mary's final appearance at Fatima, the miracle of the sun, and how she identified herself not as Our Lady of Fatima, but as Our Lady of, yes, the Rosary. I think all the signs say Rosary. Oh, 2 more. In the last 2 weeks, the last 2 guests we've had, Megan and Dee, both on their own, brought up the power and the protection of the rosary. But they said something else that was fascinating to me. Both of them on their own, Megan and Dee, both said when they prayed the rosary on a regular basis, a daily basis, they got answers to prayers like never before. They got answers to prayers. Interesting. For me, the rosary, well, as Megan said last week, initially it's a chore. You're a kid and your parents say pray the rosary. It's like, pulling teeth. It's just really. And then when you see the power of the rosary, and as Megan said, you kind of settle into it. And pretty soon you settle in and you realize what's going on. I've said before how you cannot fall in love with somebody that you don't spend time with. And what the rosary does, it sits you down for 15 or 20 minutes and you spend time with Christ. You go through his life, Mary's life, your life, and you have those beads going and you spend time with him and you settle into that. You've got your finger on a bead, an Our Father, Hail Mary, Glory Be, whatever. and you're feeling it. It's tactile. And then you're also thinking the prayer. And also your lips are probably moving, or you're saying the prayer out loud. And that combination, it just does something. And there's this connection. There's just something that happens. And when you settle in, you begin to feel things, sense things, experience things that you didn't before. And it's difficult to explain that until you experience that, until you do this yourself. A rosary. Something happened today that's never happened before. This was cool. I don't think it's a coincidence it happened today, on the day I was going to talk to you about rosary. Okay, I'm Catholic, so I go to the Mass, and most of the Mass is you're basically being read to. It's supposed to be a conversation between you and God, and I mean, there's you and Jesus. It's like Holy Spirit, Mary's there, everyone's there. You walk into the Mass, the idea is you're walking into heaven. You are there, and the conversation is supposed to be happening, but what happens, because so much is being read, it's daydream time. I have a serious problem with daydreaming. How about you? When you go to a service, daydreaming? Okay, here's what I did today by accident. I had started a rosary at home. I wasn't finished yet, so I took it with me to Mass. We got there early because my wife Beth was a reader today, so I had extra time, so I finished my rosary. But at the end, I held on to the rosary. I just held on to it. Mass begins, I'm still holding on to it. I got the beads in my palm. Between my thumb and my index finger, I'm holding the crucifix, Jesus on the cross, and I held that during the entire Mass. Wow. I cut out the daydreaming 90%. I'm not kidding. Try this. Try this. Just hang on to Jesus. Hang on to that cross. Hang on to that crucifix. He's hanging on the cross. He died for me. He died for you. It just keeps coming back. Oh, man. It just keeps... You can't leave. It doesn't let you go to daydream land. At least it didn't today. I'm just saying. I suppose this could become by rote as well if this just becomes a habit that it's just I don't think so, though. Something happened. I so recommend this. Grab your rosary, take it into church. I don't care if you're Catholic or Protestant. Dee, by the way, was Baptist. I've talked to a number of people who have listened to the Blind Faith Live podcast and this podcast who have come to understand the power of that rosary. Huge power. But if you have one that has a crucifix and you're hanging on to that crucifix and your thumb just keeps going over the body of Jesus Christ on that cross, and he died for me, and you don't wander. I'm just saying, you don't. That's what happened to me today. You don't wander. It was really powerful. It was very cool. I was thrilled. My mind was not just wandering away. It was in the game. I stayed in the game. I finished a book. Actually, I went through it twice. It's by a Father Don Calloway, and it's called Champions of the Rosary. It's a tome. It's a big book. And this Father Don Calloway, he's like a hoodlum that became a priest. It's no kidding. Better that way than the other way, I always say. So anyway, he loves Mary, talks about Mary. Go on YouTube and look for Father Don Calloway, and he's a hoot. This guy is a hoot. He's just a character, and he is so plugged into Rosary and Mary and all that. So anyway, I'm reading this book because primarily I wanted, like the stories at the beginning of this episode, I wanted to hear more stories, and there are some more stories about things that have happened through history, and then just a ton of evidence of how the rosary began, of how in the early 1200s, Mary appeared to Dominic. It's usually depicted this way. In art, it's depicted with her holding the Christ child in one arm and then extending the other arm out and her fingers handing to St. Dominic the rosary, the beads, and saying to him, this is a weapon. This is a weapon. This is your spiritual weapon. And she told St. Dominic, pray the rosary every day and preach the rosary, which is what he did. Also, in this book, there's a story I'd never heard before, and he says very few people outside of South America have ever heard this story. You ever hear of Our Lady of Rocks? Our Lady of the Rocks? Our Lady of the Rocks, not just rock. It's not just any rocks, it's the rocks. This happened in Colombia near Ecuador, 1754. This is great. There is a woman, a mom named Maria. She has a daughter named Rosa. This daughter, she can't speak, she cannot hear. And one day, rainstorm hits, they duck into some cover, and Maria, her daughter Rosa, begins speaking for the first time. And she's talking to somebody. She's speaking to a woman. Mom can't see the woman, but Rosa is now speaking. And it's like, what is that? Trying to figure this out. One day Rosa was missing, and the mom knew. I bet she's back at that canyon. So she heads back over to this rocky canyon area, and she sees her daughter, Rosa, playing with a small boy, and the boy's mom is nearby, but this time Mom, Maria, can see it. It's Mother Mary with the child, Christ's child. And the two kids are playing together. And now she understands the healing. Now she understands Jesus is the one who healed her daughter. And that's Mary right there. And they used to go back again and again to that spot. But they kept it to themselves. They kept the secret about seeing Mary and Jesus. A while later, Rosa got very sick. She died. Everybody knew she had died. But before the funeral, Mom takes Rosa back to that spot again and prays for Jesus to bring her daughter back, which he does. Now the townspeople are going, what is going on at this place? So they head on out there to see what's going on, because the daughter's now well, Rosa's now well, and yes, she's speaking, so she's got these two amazing miracles, and somebody notices on the rock there is an image, and no one noticed this image before. The image is of Mary holding the Christ child in one arm and extending with her other arm and her hand to St. Dominic the rosary. There's the image of the rosary being given to St. Dominic, and no one's ever noticed it before, and they start trying to remove the paint. Who put this image here? And it's like, wait a minute, this is... And the geologist ultimately came in and took a look at this, and this was not paint. This was in the rock. And at some point, they started boring holes into this rock and found out this goes in several feet. This is part of the rock. And this is an approved miracle that few know about unless you live in South America or in Colombia. And this is one of those touched by heaven moments again, where heaven and earth are colliding. This rock with this permanent image several feet into the rock of Mary holding the Christ child and holding out the rosary to St. Dominic. Beautiful. And I love the thought of the kids playing. I love the thought of little Jesus and little Rosa just playing together. A few years back, I was talking to a mom by the name of Tricia, and she was talking about her then 4-year-old son and an experience with the rosary.
I had gone to bed, and my husband was still up, and the boys were in bed, and my 4-year-old came down, and I could hear the conversation going on because I wasn't asleep. I was reading. And my husband and my son were talking back and forth, and my husband said, you really need to go to bed. He said, unless you want to stay up and pray a rosary with me. And so he's like, yeah, I'll pray a rosary, Dad. And so they did. They sat and they prayed. And it was, I don't know, there was something special about it that night. Like, he does that a lot with them. But there was something special about it. And I just sat and listened and enjoyed it and prayed from afar. And I think I had fallen asleep, actually. And I woke up later, and my son was in bed next to me, and I said, oh, I saw you prayed a rosary. And he said, yeah. And I said, how'd that go? And he said, I saw Mary, Mom. I saw Mary. And I said, you saw Mary? I said, well, where was she? And he said, I said, was she over by the couch? Was she over by the fireplace? And he said, she was right beside me, Mom, like right by my face. I just started thinking about, wonder what she looked like to him. And so thinking about all of the pictures or statues that we have in our home, they're all kind of neutral based, not a lot of color to them. Except I'm sure he's seen statues of her in church, in various places with color. And so I just said, well, what'd she look like? And he said, well, she had brown hair, and she was wearing blue and white. And I thought, interesting, pretty excited about this. And so I just smiled and just tried to digest it all. And I said, did she have a crown on her head? Did she have anything on her head? Thinking of the veil and everything. And he said, no crown, Mom. He said, she had one of those light up circle things. And I was like, oh, okay. Halo, yeah. So, that was about the end of it. I think it's a good chance, but I love it. I don't even think I would have thought that was possible to see somebody like that in person, to see Mary in person, or to see Jesus in person, and I believe it. I pulled up pictures of Mary on the internet, and we started scrolling through, and we got to one, and he said, "That's what she was wearing, Mom. That's what she looked like." And I said, "Oh," and that's when I had asked, because there was a crown and there were angels above, and I said, "Oh, is that what she had on her head?" And that's when he said no. And so we scrolled through the pictures, and he found one where there was a halo above her, and he said it was a light-up circle thing.
You got to think about coming from a 4-year-old, a light-up circle.
Light-up circle thing.
Yeah.
I love it.
How
I love it.
describe things.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So it was just uplifting and
Nice.
That's very
peaceful.
Nice. Thank you, Tricia. October 7th has been set aside as the day of the Holy Rosary because that day commemorates October 7th, 1571, when the power of the Rosary again was felt. Muslims were marching, or I should say sailing, towards Italy. They wanted Rome. They wanted to kill off Christianity, and there was one big naval battle coming up, the Battle of Lepanto in 1571. Smaller Christian force, bigger Islamic force. The idea is to win the naval battle, then hit Italy, and then march towards Rome. That was the plan, and that's odds makers had it, Muslims winning this one, but they didn't. And the power of the Rosary again, because the Pope had everybody praying the Rosary. He just, there was preparation for this battle. He said, pray the Rosary. Our Lady of Victory is going to give us victory this day. And everybody on those ships, they would stop before the battle, and there was Mass celebrated, and Rosary was prayed, and then off they went to battle, and they won. And it was impossible what happened, but they won. So that day, October 7th, was set aside, if you will, for Our Lady of Victory, Lady of the Holy Rosary. Muslims have also prayed the Rosary. I know that because when Mary appeared in Rwanda, she told this, I think it was 13 girls, they were in school, they were Christian and Muslim, and Mary in her apparition there said, if everybody in this class prays the Rosary every day, I guarantee you everyone will graduate. This was big news there because of economic situations, people having to stay home, work, all for a million different reasons. There was no reason there was no way all 13 girls were going to end up graduating, but that was the promise. Everybody pray the Rosary, everybody graduates, and they did. And it just brings to mind again that it doesn't matter whether you're Catholic or Lutheran or Baptist or Karen Shapiro.
Growing up Jewish, I always felt like I was being a traitor to God if I went into another church. I don't know. Nobody told me that. I just felt that. And my family all perished in the Holocaust. My grandparents, all their family perished. So I don't want to disrespect them, but I also want to open my heart to everything. I don't want to be judgy. I don't want to be labely. I just want to be, and I want to do the right thing. I don't really feel like I'm going to label myself as Jewish or Christian or whatever. I'm just going to be I'm just religious. I'm just spiritual. I just believe in God, and I carry that rosary with me all the time. And I don't know all the poems. I don't know all the prayers by heart yet. So I have a little booklet that I read, and then I take it with me. And I can tell you all the Hebrew prayers, but I have a terrible time remembering that.
I think you're amazing. I mean, there has not been a time probably since her appearance at Lourdes to St. Bernadette in 1858. I don't think there's been a time where she didn't show up, like at Fatima, Garbandal, Akita, and she always says the same thing, pray the Rosary every day. It's your greatest spiritual weapon, and it is. It changes. If you think you're under attack for anything, you start praying that, you will notice a huge diminish in the attacks.
I do. I feel it. I feel the difference when I don't, or if I get too busy and I don't stay in the habit of doing it. I absolutely feel different.
Was that, wait, a huge diminish? Is that a sentence?
I don't know. You said it. Did I
diminishing?
Say it?
No, I said it.
I'm telling you, I am so sleep deprived. I have no idea what I'm saying half the time.
Excellent. That's the way I want you. In the spirit. That way you're in the spirit the entire time. That's perfect. Okay. That's perfect. But it really does. It cuts down on the attacks. You'll find more peace in your life without question. That's just part of it. I'm amazed by you. Karen, that you really? Yeah, absolutely. I believe you're the first Jewish person to tell me that she's praying the Rosary. So that's pretty good.
I tell you what, this is really crazy. I have a friend who's Catholic as well. She's one of those very anxious people that can't stop worrying, and she'll just find things to worry about. And I told her, I said, are you Catholic? You're Catholic, right? She goes, yeah. I said, do you have a rosary? She goes, yeah. I said, why don't you pull it out and calm your mind and just pray on it? And then you don't have to be anxious about anything because you're covered. And she looked at me and she goes, honestly, it took a Jewish girl to tell me to pray the rosary. So that's what we joke about that. She goes, it had to take a Jewish girl to bring me back to the church.
Thank you, Karen. Praying her rosary. When Mary appeared to Bernadette in 1858, she appeared holding a rosary. Now, keep in mind, by this time, once again, the rosary was it was dead in France. It was dead. Other than this little pocket around Lourdes, there was still some praying of the rosary going on. And so when Mary appeared to Bernadette, she dropped to her knees, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a rosary. Through Bernadette came the water of Lourdes and all of that, and all the miracles and the healings and all that. So a few years ago, when I got the push, since my parish is St. Bernadette's, I got the push that the water of Lourdes should be at our parish. I thought, that would just be cool. The miraculous water of Lourdes. So we have a local shrine, Our Lady of Lourdes Shrine. So they have the rocks, part of the rocks that Mary stood on. So when they run water over those rocks, you have, once again, the water of Lourdes. Not like the water of Lourdes. It is the water of Lourdes. And so we were able to get water. Hopefully, my dream was, my hope was, my prayer was to get the water of Lourdes into the parish. And I brought it up at our liturgical commission. Everybody loved it, but it took a while to do. And we were several months, and I'm just waiting, going, what is this? What's the delay in this? And I'm praying a rosary that somebody gave me who had been at Lourdes. And I'm praying this rosary from Lourdes, and I'm in the middle of a decade. It was the fourth decade of the glorious mystery. So it's the Assumption of Mary into heaven. So there's Mary again. I'm praying, and as you pray a rosary, your mind's going all over the place, and I'm praying for the pastor and the priest and the deacons and the parish, the people, the office staff, and I flashed on the water. I thought about the water of Lourdes, and at that moment, my rosary breaks right in my fingers, right in my fingertips. It breaks right in the middle of a decade, and I thought, I hope I didn't lose any beads, and I counted on the left side of the break, there were 7, and on the right side of the break, there were 4 beads, 7 and 4. I didn't have a decade anymore. I had an 11 could. And I'm looking, it broke and grew a bead. Crazy, huh? Mary's way of saying, don't worry, it's coming. A few months later, on the 159th anniversary of Mary appearing to Bernadette at Lourdes, the water of Lourdes came into our parish, St. Bernadette's.
Okay, I'm ready if you're ready. So
it was really crazy. So
all right. So in the midst of putting together this podcast, I get a phone call from my niece, Marie. And this is how God works. This is how I came to my faith, to a greater faith. Heaven and earth colliding wakes us up. The miraculous wakes us up. When something happens, when God obviously is up to something, it wakes us up and helps us realize that God wants a relationship, right? That's what this is all about, having a relationship with God. So
the craziest thing happened in that
her crazy little thing that happened had to do with the fact that she's in business. She's a very successful businesswoman, but she's facing a question right now, a very difficult question of A or B, and she's not sure which way to go. So she's looking for a sign. She really is. She's going to God in her own way and looking for a sign. She's looking for something that she reads, sees, something that helps her decide which way she's supposed to go in this. So an email is sent to her, and there's a reading in it.
By John, which says, I'm the true vine.
It's the I am the vine, you are the branches. And there's talk about pruning, and she's trying to figure this out.
So complex sometimes to try to break down each word and really try to apply it to what I am doing right this second and what it means to me. So I decide to listen to your podcast.
Okay, and she's listened a few times to the podcast and
somehow receive some information.
And so she randomly picks a recent episode. It was, I think it's 17, Prophetic Dreams, in which Dee talks about these dreams she has. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. But then Dee starts referencing something.
And then she cites the exact same scripture from John.
Yes,
she did.
Yes, she did.
It was the old, yes, so I am the vine and you are the branches and all that, and away we go with that. And so this is God's funny little way of getting Marie's attention.
And that it was twice within 20 minutes. was even more interesting.
Yeah, that's a pretty good sign. You get something where it hits you twice in 20 minutes. I would say there's a message in there, Marie. I have no doubt. That's funny.
I would too.
A touched by heaven moment, getting her into the tent for a number of things. Keep in mind, when we talked about the beginning of this episode, is the rosary protection? You bet it is. But it also, when we pray the rosary on a daily basis, we get answers. Marie has a question. She needs answers. So through the podcast and this bizarre little, she gets a reading and then goes to the podcast and there it is right there in front of her again. She calls me. And by the way, this, I think, is the first time Marie's ever called me. Ever. We've texted each other at times. I'm not sure we've had maybe one phone call, maybe somewhere along the way. It's just the way it's worked. So here, this is unusual. God, through a very unusual way, is getting her into the tent to lead her to a rosary that will give her her answer and more answers too.
That was another thing I forgot to touch on was the part about the rosary. My mom is she's really organized her time so that she makes time, it seems, every day to do the rosary, and it seems to really give her a lot of comfort.
It's life-changing. It's life-changing. It changed my life. When you hear the episode, you'll hear a lot of different things that you didn't know before about the rosary. It's very powerful. But in both cases, both Megan and Dee both brought up the rosary on their own. And the Baptist listens because she heard me talking about the rosary during the Blind Faith Live podcast, and it was life-changing, not just because it gave her protection, but she said it also answered prayer. She found that prayers got answered when she prayed the rosary. She just got more answers. And Megan said the exact same thing on her own, that she said when she started praying it on a regular basis, she had questions and they were answered. Which is interesting because I don't normally hear that associated with the rosary, but it makes sense. It makes sense because the more time you spend in focused time with Christ, it just makes sense. There's a phrase I'm going to be using again, and it's that you can't fall in love with somebody that you don't spend time with. So what the rosary does, it forces you by when praying the rosary, it forces you. You're thinking about the mysteries and these different moments in Christ's life, but your mind's also bouncing all over the place. You're not just there. You're thinking about your mom. You're sending her a prayer. You're thinking about your dad. You're sending the prayer. You're thinking about the different people in your life, and you're sending them prayers. People who are sick, maybe the souls in purgatory, whatever it is, whatever, your mind's bouncing around and you're praying for them, and you're also just having daydreams and whatnot. And when you get to a daydream that you're thinking, I'd sure like to have pancakes and eggs, that's when you kind of go, wait a minute, where am I? And then you go back to the mystery that you're on and you continue praying. Some people pray every bead is a prayer for something. I don't do it that way. There could be 5 things on that bead as my mind just dances around. Sometimes there's nothing on that bead because my mind is just thinking about things. It's your greatest. Think about that. Of all the things that you could do, that little Bible in your pocket, the rosary, is the greatest spiritual weapon in your life. You want to keep away evil? That's what you pray. You want answers to your prayers? That's what you pray. It's dazzling. Or you add the Philippines in 1986 when people were praying the rosary. They were praying Ferdinand Marcos out of office. You've never heard this story, even though it's recent history. Ferdinand Marcos got voted out. He wouldn't leave. He and Imelda. And so a cardinal in the Catholic Church went on the radio and said, let's pray him out. And they gathered for rosaries. Hundreds of people, thousands, even millions gathered for rosaries. So at one point, there's these thousands, tens of thousands, I don't know how many thousands, hundreds of thousands, around Ferdinand Marcos's compound, and they were praying the rosary. So Ferdinand calls out the tanks. He calls out the tanks to roll over people. He's tired of all this stuff. Here come the tanks. They get within feet of the people who are standing there praying the rosary, within just feet, and then all the tanks stopped because all the tank drivers saw this woman in white standing there with a rosary saying, what are you doing? Don't harm my children. Stop. Obviously Mary. And they all got out of their tanks and walked away. Oh
my gosh.
Isn't that amazing? All associated.
It is amazing.
All associated with the rosary. And it's a shame we don't know that story in particular because it's such recent history. It's such recent history. But these are all true things, Marie. They're all true things. When you think about that, holding that rosary and praying that rosary, you just try to imagine the power that's in your hand. And Satan hates it, obviously. Satan hates that thing.
Oh, yeah, that was the other thing that she said that I thought was interesting, is you were talking about the ruler of the world. Oh, you started out the podcast that way.
Right.
And then you had said that the ruler's essentially the devil. And then you went on to explain that. And I feel like that resonates with me right now because I'm trying to make some really critical business decisions. And I want to make sure that in making them, I do the right thing.
And what seems the most lucrative may not be the right thing.
Exactly. And so
don't you just hate that? Don't you just wish they'd make this easy for you?
You know, when talking about the branch, back to the branch, I feel like you really have to find, if it's your spiritual branch, you have to really make sure that whom you choose to work with and run with, it really, they have to count and they really have to be aligned spiritually as well, in a sense. They have to kind of believe have the same values, believe the same things.
But the world does pull on you, doesn't it? The world does pull on you. At some point in our life, where it took me a long time to get to this point, but at some point in our lives, we have to ask what makes God happiest. What does God want me to do? Based on what my purpose is in this life and what I've been put on this earth to do and what makes God happy. Because if we follow the first commandment, which is putting God first, that means what he wants for us, what makes him happiest, is the answer to the first commandment. And we kind of bypass that commandment. We don't usually ask him what he thinks I should be doing. And if you do, Marie, if you pray a rosary and you ask for an answer, you'll get the answer. I promise you'll get the answer.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel like it's really a critical time for me to make some good, really solid, good decisions. Yeah. I think you're probably right on that, and I have to ask and focus.
Yeah, God will let you know. God will let you know. God will let you know.
I really appreciate your podcast because I listened.
And how is it in Marie's case, or in your case for that matter, because you're eavesdropping on this conversation, and maybe you have a decision also. God's leading you to pray the rosary, to get answers to your questions too. You realize that's what he's doing, right? That's why you're listening to this. You know that now, right? And as he's leading her to the rosary to, again, get answers to questions. You see what he's up to here? These little heaven and earth collisions here? And you're listening for a reason. You're a particular type of person, shall we say? You're a loving person. There's love in you. Nobody's listening to Touched by Heaven unless they have love within them. I guarantee you that. They wouldn't waste their time. Marie has tons of love. As I told her at the end of this conversation, there is a reason, a huge reason why God is blessing her with this information, that he's reinforcing that information through her mom, that her mom prays the rosary all the time. And you're doing beautifully. And I mean this. You have one of the most beautiful hearts I have ever met. You do. How you take care of your mom in particular and dad, but your mom, my sister, is totally blind, and you have always been so good to her and been so welcoming, and you've taken her to places that have just dazzled her, that you would take the time to not take a close friend, but to take your mom to some beautiful places and have some beautiful experiences. Says so much about you, Marie. She raised a good kid. She done good by you, and you done good by her. I'm always so impressed by you as a daughter, taking care of.
Well, she's one of my favorite people.
There you go. Thanks, Marie. And thanks for allowing me to share that little moment with listeners. I want to finish up here with one more rosary story. I'm going to reach into heaven for this one. I'm going to reach into heaven. During the Blind Faith Live series, we talked to an angel, a saint. She's a saint. So pure, so innocent. Her name is Colleen Steadley. Many, many times we would gather in a church and pray the rosary for Colleen and others who were ill and needed prayer. And Colleen Steadley passed away from breast cancer a few months back. And her husband, Chris, an amazing man. Chris, I don't know how he did it, but he got up and he gave the eulogy, and it was gorgeous. It was so beautiful. But Colleen talked about the rosary. So I want to finish up with Colleen Steadley, direct from heaven, direct from heaven, talking about her experiences with the rosary. And know this now about Colleen. She is 100% healthy. She is 100% healed, because when we walk into heaven, we are 100% healed, the ultimate healing. And Colleen talks to us from that place.
I had this special rosary. My family had won a trip to Italy when I was 12, and my parents had gotten my sister and I these special rosaries that were made of roses. They were wooden beads, and they were red, and they smelled like roses. And they still smell like roses to this day. I used this red rosary a lot through both of my pregnancies, just praying for a healthy pregnancy and a healthy delivery. With my second pregnancy, it broke. And so I was looking all over for another rosary just like it. It had come from the Vatican. I couldn't find one. I couldn't find one in a bookstore, couldn't find one to order online. So we tried putting it back together, and then I kind of forgot about it. My mom had gone to church at St. Lad's, which is unusual. She usually goes to St. Bernadette's. And she saw our really good friend Mary there. They did not even talk. They just kind of saw each other. And a few days later, Mary had sent my mom a rosary in the mail with a card saying, "I know you like to pray, and I thought you would like this." When I was diagnosed, my mom said to me, "I bet you would really like this rosary, and it would bring you comfort." I opened the rosary. It is the exact same one with wooden beads. It smells like roses. It's from the Vatican. She got it from a friend. And it's the color pink, though, the color of breast cancer awareness. And so that was my sign, my first sign from God, like, this is all going to be okay. And my dad tells me, "You are going to wear that rosary out."
Don't you love praying that rosary?
Yes, absolutely love it.
When did the rosary start meaning something to you?
I feel like I've always been connected to Mary. Mary's my confirmation name, and I went to Magnificat, where Mary is a huge part of the school. I feel I've experienced her a lot, and I feel very calm when I experience her. There was a time when I felt I heard her say, "Sweet child, you're going to be okay." And I see her in her blue robe with her white veil, and I just feel very comforted by her.
Colleen Steadley. The Blessed Mother Mary actually told St. Dominic, wear this rosary like a sword, belt level, on the left, and pull it out like you're pulling out a sword. Do you have your sword? It's a lot easier now. You put it in a pocket. You can put your sword in your pocket or your purse and carry it around and bring it out anytime you want to. You have the greatest spiritual weapon in the world when you carry that rosary and pray that rosary. Do you have one? You have a church that would like to hear about these collisions? Happy to come. Or if you have an event coming up where this would resonate, these kinds of stories would resonate as a way of keeping people in the pews or bringing people back, because I think this is the key to me. This is a huge key. All you have to do is share what God is doing today. The people who are leaving the church, the people who are staying away from the church, just don't know what God did today. I thank you for listening to Touched by Heaven. If you have a story for us, please go to touchedbyheaven.net, contact me there. Or if there is an event coming up that you'd like to have me speak, please go to touchedbyheaven.net and contact me there. Thank you so much for listening to this episode 20 of Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack.